Hello, everyone, and welcome into the first ever episode of Behind the Byline. I'm your host, Stephen Kister. I am a fourth year studying broadcast journalism. And first things first, I just want to get a shout out to my editors from Motina Daily Collegian, Daniel Perez and Avery Tortoa. And also want to give a shout out to Amy Schafer. Today, we're actually going to be talking about a few different things here. First things first, I just want to thank my first guest for joining me today. That is Amy Schafer, who's a third year studying several different things, including international studies. Um, the main thing I want to get started with here is just kind of get to know you a little bit in your journey to Penn State. Obviously, you started at Daniel Boone High School in Reading or the Reading, Pennsylvania area. Yeah, so kind of just tell me your journey a little bit growing up and then how you chose Penn State.
Yeah, so I grew up as a Penn State football fan. Both my parents are Penn State alumni, so Penn State was always kind of a school that I considered applying to. Ended up applying to Penn State in my senior year of high school, and I got accepted to Schreier Honors College, which was a large factor in my decision, along with like scholarship money, and kind of just always had a love for Penn State, so it seemed kind of like the natural choice when I was going to college.
Very good. And so, yeah, like I said, you're studying a couple of different things here. Obviously, you're in the Schafer Honors College. But yeah, so tell me a little bit more about your major, public relations, advertising, global international studies, and then you also have minors,
Yeah.
Spanish and women's studies. I have a couple of different majors there as well, couple of different minors there. Where do you think those kind of came from?
Yeah, I entered Penn State as a double major in public relations and poli sci. Ended up studying abroad after my spring semester. Studied abroad in the summer after my freshman year, and I loved it, which is kind of why I ended up switching my major to global and international studies. But yeah, I definitely have always kind of had a passion for a few different areas. It's kind of funny that I'm not a journalism major and I'm the editor in chief at the Daily Collegian, but I think definitely kind of like the interdisciplinary areas of study helps me a lot with journalism. So yeah.
Yeah, you actually mentioned it yourself there, and that was one of the things I found fascinating. In your sophomore year, you basically traveled abroad twice.
Yeah.
Once in Buenos Aires and also in the Czech Republic. I believe in Buenos Aires, you served under the CSA attorneys
Yeah.
as a legal intern. Kind of tell me about that experience.
Yeah, I studied abroad. Yeah, I studied abroad in between my freshman and sophomore year in the summer in Czech Republic. And I absolutely loved the experience, which is kind of what led me to study abroad again in Buenos Aires. And yeah, I was working. I've always kind of had a passion for law school. I did law internships in high school, still considering a career as a lawyer. So I interned at an immigration law firm in the city called CSA. And it was a really great experience. Got really a lot of like hands-on experience working in a second language. I was doing a lot of translation stuff from Spanish to English, kind of having to bounce between using Spanish and English, which was a really good experience. Um, and a lot of the clients that I worked for, I did something called an O1 visa, which is like visas of extraordinary ability, which was really cool. So I got to work on like visas for like professional soccer players and stuff that were going to the US. And the firm that I worked at actually had Messi as a client. They helped him get his
Wow.
visa prior to like my time working there to play in the United States. So it was really cool to get kind of like such good experience so young in my career working at like a really prestigious firm in another language. So yeah.
Very cool. And so, yeah, I mean, what kind of stood out for those? What was the process again? Those two internships, obviously in two very different countries. Um, Studied in Czech Republic first, and then went to Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
So what was that kind of process like?
Yeah, in Czech Republic, I did an internship in public relations working underneath the mayor of one of the districts in the city. And I was basically creating like a strategic communications plan for the social integration of the foreigner community in the Czech Republic, primarily working with the English speaking community, being a resource for them. Kind of did a lot of different things, everything from I was teaching English at a school for Ukrainian refugee students to representing kind of like the English speaking, being kind of like a resource for English speaking population at different cultural festivals, doing a little bit with social media stuff for the district offices there. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience.
Very cool. And, one of the things that stood out to me as well is I believe you were actually elected as editor in chief during the time of studying abroad.
Yeah, so
S
yeah, I got elected editor-in-chief, I think 2 days before I left for Buenos Aires, so,
Wow,
yeah, I started my tenure as editor-in-chief in another country, in a different
that's
time
pretty
zone.
cool.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting challenge, especially, like, trying to, first off, like, adjust into the new role of, like, leading the newsroom, but also doing it, like, while I'm not actually in the newsroom, so
Right.
definitely was, like, a really good learning experience. Over the summer, kind of before I got back, there was, like, a few months where I was, like, leading everything remotely from, Buenos Aires, and it was funny, I was taking, like, Zoom calls while I was traveling to, like, Patagonia. I was, like, in
Nice.
a nice storm zooming in for a meeting, and
Nice.
but, yeah, definitely, like, an interesting experience, but everything worked out well. Nick, who was the previous editor-in-chief, was very helpful at, like, getting me adjusted, and I was able to kind of do everything virtually because a lot of people are, home for the summer anyway, so a lot of our stuff was remote anyway.
Nice. And so, you know, yeah, again, just starting in your second year as editor in chief, that's a big achievement for anyone. And I know that, you weren't necessarily, you haven't dreamt of, being the editor in chief coming into it. And actually, I know that you spent at the Collegian a couple different roles, a broad columnist, news editor, news reporter, bureau beat writer, which I also did, of course.
Mm.
And I know that you actually applied originally to the Collegian as a sports writer. Talk about that transition, applying
Yeah.
to sports staff and then, getting into news staff and loving it.
Yeah, so I kind of found the Collegian in a really interesting way. I was never really considering journalism at all when I got to Penn State. I knew I wanted to get involved in something in the College of Com, and my NSO mentor was actually Megan Swift, who's a previous editor in chief, and she was talking all about the Collegian during my orientation week. And it sounded really cool, and I kind of just decided to apply to it on a whim, mainly motivated by the fact that I was a huge Penn State football fan growing up. Thought it would be like a fun way to get, writing experience, and I applied actually to the sports staff. I think I might have put, like, lifestyle or news as a backup, and, I ended up getting placed on the news staff, which I was, like, at first disappointed by because I really thought I wanted to be, like, a football reporter. I thought I
Sure.
could just walk on to the football beat, like, as a
Right, right.
freshman. Obviously, that's not how it works
Yeah.
now that I know how everything works, but, yeah, I got placed on the news staff. I absolutely loved it. My first event coverage was covering, like, this huge protest that broke out
Wow.
when Gavin McInnes came to campus, like, the founder of
Oh,
Proud Boys.
wow.
And I honestly, like, I really just saw the value in news reporting, kind of dove right in, loved it, which is eventually what led to me news editing, which I also just really loved, and kind of my passion for journalism just continued to grow throughout that time. Um, and yeah, that's kinda what made me decide to apply for editor-in-chief. Now I love journalism, I'm even considering, like, a career in it, so yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. And one of the things that stood out to me most, throughout all you've kind of done as a college student so far in your college career, I've noticed a lot that you like to travel a lot.
Mhm.
There's a lot of advocacy, and that there's a lot of law, and of course you said journalism. Um, where do you think that comes from? Like, where is the advocacy as well as just wanting to cover human rights and stuff like that? Where do you think that passion comes from?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I've always had, like, a passion for, intercultural communication. I feel like study abroad and is a very, like is a very formative experience. I
Mm,
feel like it's very, kind of interconnected with journalism as well. I think it's like you have the opportunity to talk to a lot of people that you might not talk to regularly, and learn from, like, people around you, learn from people that, um, are different than you, which I think is kind of similar to the reason for which I love journalism so much.
mm.
But yeah, I think, like, uh, obviously, like, I love kind of covering, like, the human interest stories. I love kind of having the chance to, like, talk with people, yeah, I don't know if that answers your
No, yeah,
question.
that's perfect. Yeah. And one of the things too, you did the whole law thing as well. So,
Mhm.
um, where do you think that comes to play? I mean, I know you said you were considering a degree in law. Obviously, those two things are kind of, very different. I mean, I think they both kind of cover the same sort of thing, but from different standpoints. Um, how do you think you'd kind of do the two if you were planning on doing the two, or what your kind of thought is there.
Yeah, so right now, kinda I'm thinking I wanna take a few years and maybe work in journalism or maybe
Mm.
PR before law school. I think my end goal right now is still to be a lawyer. I've honestly really loved the journalism industry, and I'm kind of considering a career in media law right now.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't have it all fully figured out yet, but,
Right.
I think definitely covering something in the law sphere, like on a crime and courts reporting kind of role or something like that. Definitely, I think there's, like, a lot of overlap between, like, the reasons I love journalism and the reasons I love, like, law and PR, so
Yeah, that's awesome. And your love for sports, how do you think that comes into play? Like, I believe you played soccer in high school.
yeah.
Um, do you think there's any sort of connection there between the sports and then the motivation to do law and journalism and stuff like that? Like, is there anything you think that's helped you in that aspect?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I love watching, like, I love kinda just having the chance to lead and, like, organize the Collegian sports coverage, like, I love seeing the all the sports reporters and editors that we have are phenomenal, and so, even though I guess I didn't really come up through the sports side of the Collegian, I still love kind of seeing them excel and succeed, um, and yeah, like, the stuff we've done is phenomenal. We've had people, go on to really great careers after working for the
Mm.
Collegian on the sports division, so yeah.
That's awesome. And one of the things I wanted to discuss too, actually, which I think is probably one of the, hotter topics right now. I
Mhm.
know that one of your first goals as the collegiate editor in chief was to establish a diversity, equity, and inclusion board. What was that? Why was that so important to you? And how did you kind of go about doing that?
Yeah, so, yeah, our DEI committee, I think's done phenomenal work. That was definitely something important. To me, kind of going into my role as editor in chief, it's something that we haven't necessarily had before, and I've always felt was needed. I think definitely, like, coming in, one of my major goals was making sure that we're approaching our coverage through a more intersectional lens. I know the Collegian always hasn't had the best relationship with minority communities over the course of
Mm.
history, and kind of working to improve and repair those relationships has been, like, a really strong goal for me. Even with everything kind of going on in the country right now, the Collegian's not gonna roll back on anything that we're doing DEI-wise. Our committee's been doing phenomenal work. Avery Hill, who's the committee chair, has been, doing a phenomenal job at leading all of that. And we've had some, like, really great projects come out of it. So, yeah, definitely something I'm excited for, going into the future and hoping that will continue beyond my time as EOC.
Very nice. And, you know, for the students, not just the students, but even like the local population, the state college, I think that's a very important initiative to have, especially again in today's age. How do you think that kind of, plays into the Penn State, the we are, as well as, we had our stories taken away not long ago just for reasons of um, kind of taking away from that, I feel. And so, how do you think, as the collegian, we are putting ourselves out there and saying, we're going to put our hand out there and help others?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think student journalism is a really key part of the state college community. Um, we at the Collegian really work to hold the university accountable for things. We're kind of the coverage we're a completely independent student outlet. We're not connected with the university in any way. So, all the stories that we're pursuing stuff without fear. Our reporters are really trying to, bring those stories to light that matter in the community. We cover everything from Penn State administration to kind of the downtown arts culture and everything. So I think, like, kind of every position on the Collegian, every role, everything that we cover, is important in its own way.
Yeah.
Whether it be those, like, hard hitting investigative pieces or like the more fun personality profiles, there's kind of a role for everything. And kind of keeping the student body informed in an era where people kind of don't really want to stay informed and tend to shift towards social media. I mean, we've been shifting our strategy as a journalism outlet to kind of meet the student audience where they are, which is on social media. So, kind of taking that social media first approach, making sure that we're sharing the news on avenues that we know students are going to be.
Yeah. And, you know, as you mentioned, like, I mean, the Collegian is one of the oldest and most prestigious college newspapers in the nation. I think nobody would argue that. And, of course, had to go from, completely newspaper to now, printing every Wednesday, I believe. Um, And so how do you think that has changed the Collegian and, kind of what's your standpoint on that, moving towards more of a media kind of company, competing with Onward State and, um, yeah, so if you can touch on that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think we've seen like a huge shift in the Collegian's strategy as an outlet. I think we've moved from being more of just a newspaper in the past to now being a media outlet. I mean, we do all kinds of video content, social media content, photography as well. And yeah, we print once a week. We still print our print edition once a week on Fridays. But we're doing a lot more than that. We're updating stuff on our website daily, and we're putting out, more than just that written content. I think a lot of students still think of us as just being a newspaper, but I would say that now we are more of a media outlet than just a newspaper.
Very cool. And so I kind of want to go back to your past a little bit here. Obviously, started as a news reporter and then news editor, and then went abroad to be a columnist. Um, so, within that, you also served as a legal intern. We kind of talked about that in Buenos Aires, um, where you covered, sort of different things here: litigation, corporate United States, commercial United States immigration law. Um, what does that kinda look like, how's that kinda led to where you are today?
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think definitely like my legal experience has come in handy as editor in chief. I think there's like a lot of times when, you need to kind of have a good handle on the law. I've taken media law classes. Um, and I think just also the writing skills that I developed from that experience was definitely helpful. Um, Not so much related to immigration, but I think kind of a general knowledge of the law comes in handy as editor in chief when you have to kind of make hard decisions when it comes to I don't know, the university removing our newsstands
Right.
and the issues with censorship there, or when it comes to, making sure that there's never any issues of libel or anything like that, making sure reporters are informed on laws like that. So yeah, I definitely say that my experience kind of being in a variety of different disciplines has come in handy to journalism.
Right, yeah, and yeah, so, I mean, you've done a lot of it. You've done, obviously, the legal side. Also, you served as a social media intern for the Penn State College of Health and Human Development.
Mm.
Yeah, so, I mean, I would say you're pretty well cultured and pretty well-rounded, and again, I would say incredibly impressive becoming the editor-in-chief sophomore year. Um,
Thank
I
you.
Yeah, no problem, and I would kinda just say, what I know we kinda talked about your future a little bit, and obviously don't have to have it all figured out right now, of
Mhm.
course, only junior year. Um, but what are your kinda goals going forward as the editor-in-chief?
Yeah, I still have one more year left at Penn State. I've absolutely loved my time as editor in chief. I think it's been a really rewarding experience, and it's really made me fall in love with journalism even more than I already was when I applied for this role. But one thing that kind of developed over the course of the year that I didn't really anticipate was also kind of a love for, like, the business side of things. Um, I definitely think we're in an interesting situation with the Collegian right now. I mean, we've just
Mm,
lost, a large portion of the funding that we had, which was from the university. Kind of when they cut our funding, I started thinking more in a mode of how can I help our outlet to become more sustainable for the future, and I think we're in a really transitional period where stuff like fundraising is going to be, fundraising, advertising revenue, and stuff's going to be really crucial to excelling our outlet forward. And, that's kind of what motivated me now, kind of going into next year. Um, I toyed with the idea of applying for editor in chief again, but
mm,
I think I'm going to, I think while I've loved the role, I decided to apply for a business manager on the business division side, just because I really feel like I want to try my hand at new things, challenge myself in an area that I haven't done before. And I've kind of learned so much in my time as editor in chief about, how to develop a pitch for fundraising, kind of based and rooted in um, showing why your journalism matters and has a community impact. And so I think that that's something that, could help not just me professionally develop more skills going forward into the journalism industry, but also something that could be beneficial to our outlet to kind of have someone on the business side with the editorial knowledge that's kind of um, spearheaded a lot of the projects and stuff that we might be using to apply for grants and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And one of the last things I want to go over here or talk about more specifically is, you have the Collegian, you have Onward State. Obviously, there's a bit of a rivalry there.
Mm,
Um, but for me personally, one of the biggest things I found in being in the Collegian, is just um, how I guess structured it is, and how it reminds me a lot actually of the New York Times in a lot of ways.
mhm.
With the code of ethics, which I think is extremely more important now these days. Um, why do you think that is? I mean, like, why? What makes the Collegian so different?
Yeah, so I think the Collegian, while we are a student outlet, we operate on in a very similar structure to any professional outlet. We work at a very quick pace here. All of our students are volunteers, but they're also performing at a very high level. It does kind of mimic that professional newsroom environment. And I would say that we put out content that competes with a lot of local newsrooms across Pennsylvania. Um, I was very thankful to for the Collegian to be part of the Penn State, um, or not the Penn State, the Pennsylvania News Association journalism lab in PA. Wait, the local media association PA Lab for Journalism is
Wow.
what it's called. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No, you're good. That's
um,
all a mouthful.
yeah, and so, yeah, we had the opportunity to kind of work with a lot of other local news organizations in PA and then attend a conference in Chicago, where we pitched a project, and, it was really rewarding to kinda work with them over the month period that that lab was I think it was, like, 3 months actually,
Mm,
period that the lab was going on, and kind of work with other it was an interesting situation for me because it was like we were the only student journalism outlet that was kind of involved in that, but we were
mm.
kind of on the level, with a lot of other, like, really respected outlets in Pennsylvania that do really great work, so it was really a valuable experience that also kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, like, while we are a student outlet, we're also performing at a really high level and giving people, like, real world experience that they can take with them as they go into their career.
Very cool. And yeah, I was kind of actually brainstorming ways to end this show, and I think I came up it's a little cliche, but I think it's a good one. Um, to any freshmen coming in, um, what would you tell them about the College of Communications, or just any lessons that you learned? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think people are always giving advice on career stuff, and while that's helpful, I would say, like, the biggest thing I learned from this experience, was kind of, like, how to work with others, and I think the most valuable part of being involved in the Collegian for me was, getting to meet, like, really amazing people. I've met, some of my best friends at the Collegian, both my roommates I met at the Collegian currently, and, it's just I think, like, the most valuable part of the College of Communications is the opportunity that you have to interact with and collaborate with other students and, work together to produce something that you really care about. I think so many people, whether you're involved in the Collegian or any other Penn State student media organization, just, like, kind of seeing and being in an environment where other people care about what they're doing just as much as you do, is kind of the most beneficial thing. So I guess my advice would be, for incoming freshmen to, put themselves out there and get involved and kind of dive headfirst into something that they're passionate about.
Very good. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been an
Yeah.
absolute blast. And to all my listeners, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this. This is gonna be something we're working on every week. You can probably expect it every Monday. So, yeah, be sure to tune in next Monday, and our next guest will be announced soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.